Any good medic player will tell you just how important grounded movement is in TF2. Your W, A, S, and D keys serve as the first line of defense against taking damage, and surfing rockets to complete safety, gliding just in between scattergun shots, and baiting out bad shots with movement can make these players feel just unkillable. This is all very important for a class like Medic, where surviving means more healing and uber charges for your team, making this a skill medics focus on improving. But what about Demoman? Every competitive demo understands that positioning, aim, and decision making are key skills, but grounded movement gets emphasized far too little for how valuable a skill it is. And while my thoughts on demo jumping is quite clear, I want to give some attention to the grounded movement too. I'm going to go over a few in-game examples of how this skill gives you direct benefits in competitive, and give a few tips on how to get better at grounded movement on any class. The first place that your grounded movement gives you the upper hand is the very first thing you do in a competitive game, the mid fight. Demo is usually the first person to show up on mid, and on most maps both demos will exchange a couple stickies before the teamfight really starts. As you might expect, a demo that has good movement and can dodge those early stickies is more likely to have a health advantage going into the fight, and won't have to give up any positioning or damage in order to get healed, which gives their team a much better chance of winning the fight with advantageous positioning earned early on. Next is defensive exchanges, especially in Koth. Uber exchanges are quite common in Koth, usually with the attacking team taking an Uber in aggressively to get Uber charges off the table first before trying to capture the point. Usually this involves a solo scout beelining for a demo to either damage them enough to force the opponent's Uber, or hopefully even kill them before their medic saves them with Uber. However, if you can dodge just 2 or 3 scattergun shots, then you won't be in danger of dying and your medic can hold their Uber for just a little bit longer, giving your team a much better exchange and shutting down any aggressive ideas your opponents had, which is exactly what you want in a defensive exchange. Lastly is any time a player gets in on you and is threatening to kill you before your teammates can help. Sometimes a sacking soldier decides that your medic is positioned too safely and bombs you instead, or a scout rushes in unspotted, or late in a scrappy fight an opportunistic soldier sees you isolated. In all these scenarios you are suddenly put in extreme danger, and being able to survive for even fractions of a second longer might make the difference between your opponent securing a valuable trade or your team getting a free pick to work with. When it comes to tips on how to improve this survivalist movement, the first answer is the most obvious. It's all about practice. Just playing the game while being mindful about these scenarios will help you improve quickly by paying attention to incoming spam and rocket surf timings. Jump maps can be a good way to practice surfing as well, with rocket jump sinks on soldier being the most direct way to practice surfing rockets that I can think of. In a game like TF2, where nearly every weapon is high damage and slow firing, fights can start to have a rhythm to them. If you can key into this and synchronize your movement patterns with expected shots being fired, then you will bait enemies into expecting one strafing direction, only to fire just as you switch it up, avoiding the shot entirely. In short, timing your movement switch-ups to when you think your opponent is firing is going to give you far more success than just doing so randomly. When you're being bombed by a soldier, obviously you'd like to surf their rocket, but it's important where you surf it. In order to not only avoid fall damage, but also to keep yourself out of harm's way from follow-up rockets, try to land on high ground whenever possible. Also, if you can surf to your optimal sticky range as well, then you can put yourself in a powerful offensive position off of the back of a strong defensive play. Speaking of ranges, every projectile has 2 kinds of ranges, where you're too close to be able to react to it and when you're not. This is decided by not only your reaction time, but also the speed at which you can dodge and the speed of the projectile. But playing just outside of that unreactable range means you can react after they fire to minimize or avoid damage without having to predict anything. While damage surfing is most commonly seen off of explosions, all damage in TF2 applies knockback, and you can surf away from any type of damage, not just explosions. If you're getting chased down by a scout and you're confident they'll hit their shot, then you can jump and crouch to surf the meat shot out of their range and maybe live. Or if a fight is going poorly on last and you have plenty of health left, then you might be able to catch a ride on a heavy's minigun to get out. In any situation where a scout is in on you and you aren't prioritizing killing them at that moment, whether it be because you don't have anything loaded and need to buy some time to reload a shot, or you won't be able to kill them as quickly as your teammates, then not looking at your opponent can throw off their aim. Most players practice exclusively against opponents that are looking at them and fighting them. So not doing so, or especially not focusing your aim on anything in particular, curving your aim to give circular strafes, will be very unfamiliar movement for them to hit. Combine this with some well-timed counter strafes to their shots, and you'll quickly break their confidence in hitting their shots. To close things off, a running Demoman is the third slowest class with a meager 280 hammer units per second speed. But that's more than enough to make an impact on the outcomes of your fights and games. While I only provided a few in-game examples, grounded movement and dodging damage comes into play basically the entire time you're playing TF2. It's important for competitive Demomen to keep in mind that dealing damage isn't the whole equation, and that the damage they take plays a big role as well. If you're a demo player that found anything I said here useful, or just someone who likes hearing me ramble in detail about the nuances of 6v6 TF2, then I hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you think. But that's all from me. Have a good one, everyone.